let me put you on the spot and ask you this question, that do you think governance failure has led to a missed decade as far as India goes in this 2010 to 2020?
Yeah. I'm an economist, so every time you ask me what's the culprit, and it's the economy. And I think at some level it has to do with governance, but I think we will waste less time if we agree on what the economic policies and economic changes are needed. You take the situation of power. Everybody was kind of astonished at 300 million one day, 600 million people the other day, people stranded in trains, in metros, in roads, hospitals without power. I mean, it was a human tragedy. And so you can say it's governance. And it's the core, it's the regulators, it's the etc., etc. At another level, there are very simple economic solutions for that. You have incentives to invest in power. You have an installed power capacity that can be used better and more efficiently. You have transmission, one of the best transmission companies in the world, Power Grid. So there are enormous assets in the system. You have Coal India, which has substantial reserves. You have open ports. You can import coal, Australia and Indonesia, not far away. So this is not beyond one's reach, but it implies very key policy changes. You need to have a regime where coal is freely available. I mean, I just find it extraordinary that you have such a distorted system on coal that if you sell at the market price, then it becomes something which is illegal. For coal, one can understand that. For drugs or for something special, but for coal, this is like potatoes in the world. So I think if you were to change the policy regime, you would change the governance, because governance feeds into rents, and rents feeds from artificial scarcities that are created by regulation.
Exactly. I think I'll put it as a journalist. What you're saying is the outcome is crony capitalism, and in a way it feeds into a governance failure. So how does, I mean, as an economist, as a World Bank practitioner, you're a third empire in India. So how do you break this vicious circle of crony capitalism, governance failure? It just reinforces itself.
It has been broken before. If you think about all the rents associated to imports, when you had the very heavy tariffs on imports, and you have very strict licenses on imports, or the industrial license Raj, again, very high rents, a lot of side payments, etc. So India did it not once, but several times. When the price of steel was liberalized, when the truck industry in the 1980s was freed. So I think that once you let market forces operate, you remove a lot of the incentives for misgovernance and misappropriation of rents, and you get much better economic outcomes.
But it's a lot of these rents move to resources.
Right.
So whether you see spectrum, whether you see airports, whatever you see. So the question is, we haven't yet effected even a market-based mechanism which can be transparent, which can achieve the best outcome, because often the obsession comes from finance ministry in meeting its fiscal gap rather than looking at how to optimize the use of that resource. So is that a fundamental problem, the way we have approached the problem, or is it that you have to learn, this is the way you learn, trial and error?
I don't see what you're describing as a means of finance kind of way of operating. You may be right. I just don't look at it that way. The way I would see it is that you have a number of restrictions put in place, whether it's coal, whether it's land, land use conversion, power, which creates incentives for a misallocation of resources. Now, it's not beyond human imagination, and it's certainly not beyond India's ability to do it, to change this panorama, and it's within reach.
What about jobs? Because one of the biggest phenomena that we have seen, which is stunning, contrary to our intuition, is that this stupendous pickup in growth, which is almost now India the $2 trillion economy, has not led to a commensurate growth in employment. So it's what we call jobless growth.
Yeah.
So
it's jobless growth in the sense of formal jobless growth, not informal. Informal jobs creation has been very rapid. And for an individual, of course, you prefer to have a formal job with social security and all the formalities that come with jobs. I'm not saying it's not important, but at this stage of development, what comes first is having a job. Whether it's formal or informal, you know, if it pays, and it pays well, it's excellent. But again, I think that the reasons why India has been unable to create jobs the way other economies have, like China and or Korea, when Korea was still a low to middle income country, has been this law of access to infrastructure services, from water to power to sanitation to roads to access to railways and so on and so forth. So I think the problem of infrastructure in India is really the one I would put.
Looking at the bank, what do you think should be the future contour of the World Bank in the context of all that we discussed? And also, isn't it time for a non-American to lead this bank?
On your last question, I would say two things. One is that it is important that the World Bank reflect the global economy. The global economy needs institutions like the IMF and the bank, but the global economy is changing all the time, and therefore the governance of the bank and the governance of the IMF need to be responsive to these changes. And this has started to happen with the changes in the shareholding structure. You may think it has been going too slow or not enough, and you're probably right, but it is happening, and but will need to happen probably continue and faster. In terms of who leads the bank, I think one, you know, a lot has been said in the last 12 months when the succession of Mr. Zelig came up. And I remember an interview that Mr. Zelig was, where he was asked, should a non-American succeed you? And he said, you know, I thought he gave a very good answer, which is, from the point of view of the global economy, it's important to have an American leading one institution. The Americans never led the WTO. They never led the IMF. They never led the UN. So it makes sense that to have one institution led by an American. Now, whether that institution should be the World Bank, or should be the IMF, or should be the UN, I think, you know, I don't think it matters. But clearly you need to have a governance structure which represents everybody and be inclusive rather than exclusive. So you want emerging economies to be represented, but you don't want to exclude advanced economies.
And finally, I believe you're not just signing off from the India job, but you're also signing off from the World Bank.
That's correct.
So what are your future plans?
My future plan is to have no plan. That's, I think there are stages in life where it's important not to have a plan and see what life brings you. And
aren't you itching to do a book on India?
Oh, you know, every person who comes to India itches to do a book when they leave, and my wife always tells me that one should resist its temptation because one can never capture the complexity of India. Doesn't mean I will not try, but I'll be very cautious.
Great thought, Roberto. Wish you all the best. Thank you very much for watching Mint.